afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this webinar on how to score 760 on the GMAT. My name is Rajat Sadana. I'm one of the co-founders of e-GMAT, and I'm going to be your main host today. I'm super excited to be in this session. I look forward to this session throughout the week, and in fact to our weekend sessions. I'm really happy that you guys are here. In this webinar, we're going to really help you create your own study plan to get to your target GMAT score, whatever that score is. And we're going to really talk about what is a personalized study plan, what should it provide to you, and you know, what are the metrics that you should look for to really say whether you have a study plan that is likely to help you get to your target GMAT score. And since we've been talking about your target GMAT score, let's kind of get some statistical data points over here to really say what's the score that you're aiming for. All right, let's get a few more data points over here. Okay, so the biggest group over here is those who are aiming for the 730 to 750 group. I have a surprisingly high number of people in the 760 or higher group. It's about 32%, 21% are in the 710, 720 group, and about 5% of you are there in the 600 to 700 bracket. It's really good to know, by the way. And while we're at it, let's kind of understand where you currently are. You know, for those of you who know your current GMAT scores, I've taken a mock test. I'd like to understand where you currently stand. Okay. So a good chunk of you do not have your current scores, but what you can really see otherwise is the biggest group over here, the kind of two big groups, the 610 to 650 bracket, which is what we call as the score plateau group, which, by the way, a significant number of you are also in that 660 to 700 bracket, but then a good number of you are also in that 400 to 500 bracket over here. So and then beyond that, I think the biggest group, or rather overall the biggest group, is those who don't know what your current score is. For those of you who don't know what your current score is, we offer the world's most comprehensive mock test. You can really get to that and essentially figure out what your current score is. Now with that, let's get started with the webinar. So in this webinar, as I said, we're going to help you create your study plan. Now, in our free trial, we do have a bunch of free concepts. There are free concepts on sentence correction, critical reasoning, number properties, algebra, reading comprehension, and so on and so forth. So if you've not explored the free trial, you know, just log into your e-GMAT account. If you're a paid student, you'd go to your paid courses. If you're a free trial student, you would you'd actually get to the free trial courses over there. But about 25 or 30 video lessons in the free trial, about 5% of all e-GMAT offering is there as a part of the free trial. With that, we also have some upcoming free webinars. So we have a free quant workshop that's tomorrow, 24 hours from now. Think of this quant workshop as a proctored mock test plus. So think of it as a super mock test just focused on quant. In this mock test, we not only give you an estimate of where you are, we actually then figure out which of the 5 subsections or sub areas, number properties, word problems, geometry, algebra, or PNC probability is causing your score to really be where it is. We also kind of tell you why is it, which skills are limiting your quant score. So you get that, not only that estimate, but you also get that personalized feedback on how to go about improving your score. And then next week, we have probably our most popular webinar, which is how to use GMAT sentence correction. That's on 30th of May at 7 a.m. Pacific time. This webinar is hosted by Payal Tandon, who actually is the inventor of meaning-based approach for GMAT sentence correction. 10 years ago, she was the first one who coined the term meaning-based approach, about a year and a half before Manhattan GMAT started using that term. So with that, let's kind of understand, when do you plan to take the GMAT? As you can really see, the biggest group over here hasn't taken their data as of yet, and then this is actually the response to this question is really useful with another data point, which is when do you guys plan to apply? So if you can put that data as well. But again, the biggest group over there, those who haven't taken a date as of yet, that's about 200 of you. Um, then the next biggest group is those who are planning to take the test in 46 to 75 days. And then you can really see it's essentially an increasing order from very few in the next 15 days to about 60%, those who haven't taken a date as of yet. When do you plan to apply? The biggest group over here is in R1 of 2020. Now, if you are planning to apply in R1 of 2020, by the way, which is a great idea, I would truly recommend that you take the test sooner rather than later. And when I say sooner, by middle of June. R1 of 2020, as we had predicted in early February, actually, when China had closed down, that it's going to be probably the most competitive R1 that we're going to really see, and so is going to be R2 overall, uh, and uh, and uh, and so just make sure that if you're planning to apply for in R1 of 2020, get that GMAT out of the way, which also means that always have a backup option, prepare for the online GMAT, not just the in-center GMAT. So make sure that you always have. I call this a BATNA, which is best alternative to no agreement. It's a term that I learned at B school, which means that, hey, if test centers don't open, you should be prepared for the online version of the test. With that, let's go right into our presentation part over here. What you see here is essentially a presentation with a Q&A pod. With that, let me also introduce my team. Supporting me in this webinar is Sandeep. Sandeep is a GMAT strategy expert. He's going to make sure that your questions get answered overall. So if you have a question during this webinar, you can put that question in the Q&A pod. So with that, let's kind of start with why is it that you should get a score of 730 or higher in general when it comes to acing the GMAT. Now, how many of you over here are aiming for top B schools? How many of you over here? Let's just put in a yes, no poll over here. Select yes if you're aiming to apply to a top B school. Select no if you plan to apply to really a school in rank 25th to 30th. All right, 91% of you plan to apply to top B schools. So the three reasons why you should aim for a higher GMAT score. One is top B schools now actually require more or less a score of 730 or higher. The second is when you think about scholarships and fellowships, and I think let's get another poll question. How many of you are looking for a scholarship or fellowship or overall? For those of you looking for a scholarship or fellowship, you should know that B schools have a ton of money to give out even in today's times, and a good chunk of those scholarships, that money goes to people who get to that score of 730 or higher. And then when you think about the difference in total earnings over a 10-year period between someone who graduates from a top B school versus someone who graduates from a tier 2 school, that's the highest that it has ever been. And my guess really is, given the macro situations where we are in, that's this number, even though it's the highest it has ever been, over the next 3 to 4 years, that delta is even going to increase. If you're graduating from a top B school, you're going to get paid a lot more. If you're not graduating from a top B school, your salary is probably, the delta is going to be higher. So overall, these 3 points today could lead to a delta of about $500,000 in your net worth over the next 10 years. My guess is this number is going to be higher when we talk about this 12 months from now. So just to prove these 3 points, when you look at the trend of GMAT scores at top B schools, what you really see is over the last 5 years they've gone up, and they've kind of gone towards that 730 score or so. In fact, these are median schools. If you're from a highly competitive pool, add 20 points to this. And if you look at some of these stats, this has happened despite a decline in GMAT test taking population. So for those of you who think about, hey, the test takers are going to be fewer, actually, in the next 8 months, we expect more people to take the test, especially given that China is coming back online slowly. And then also more and more people, since they're unemployed, are expected to take the test. And this is expected to push these scores even higher. And this trend is continued even with the reducing test taking population, even beyond the top B schools. You see the black dots are where you have tier 2 schools, and you can see some of the biggest score changes over the 5-year period have come from these tier 2 schools overall. And this was statistical data. Let me just share some anecdotal data over here. So here's an example of a student, Nishant. We actually interviewed him. He's just graduating from Columbia right now. Scored a 690, was rejected by a bunch of schools, scored a 740. He got a full fellowship from a bunch of schools as well as an admit from Columbia. And the nice thing about Tuck is that if you apply to Tuck, they actually give you really good feedback. It's a school that I absolutely love. The culture, the campus, the people who work over there. And Tuck really told him, he said, we love your candidacy, but your GMAT score is not up to mark. Pravi applied to but 6 schools, did not get a single interview invite when she had a 680, just updated her score to 740. Within 7 hours, she got 5 interview invites. She got multiple scholarships, as you can really see. She just graduated from Kellogg recently. Krishnakant, again, applied in round 2 with a 680, rejected from every school. Applied in round 3 with a 720. So this is round 3 where people really say, hey, you don't get admissions. And this is round 3 of last year. Got full fellowships from pretty much every school he applied to overall. Okay. And again, essentially, your GMAT score is way more important than it has ever been in the context of admissions overall. By the way, in today's world, if you have a GMAT score, given that a bunch of schools have said you don't need a GMAT score, but if you apply with a GMAT score, your GMAT score actually becomes much more valuable even then. Let's talk about scholarships. Okay, think about it. US B schools give about $350 million of merit-based scholarships. European B schools give about $50 million. So the kitty is not as big, but there are fewer top schools in Europe. Overall. Now, based on our estimates, an e-GMAT does get about $30 to $35 million worth of scholarship every year. But 55% of the scholarship money goes to those 6,000 people who get to a 740 or higher score. And about 80% of this money goes to folks who get to a 710 or higher. What it really means is if you do the math, and the math is fairly simple, if you apply properly, score a 740 or higher, that's the average scholarship amount that you would get. As you saw from anecdotal data on the prior slides, you could actually get a way more scholarship. And again, what factors decide scholarships? One is your GMAT score, and the second is how you perform during the interview. Here's some more anecdotal data over here. Mansi, who's studying at Harvard, she got a 770, got $90,000 worth of scholarship from Harvard. Victor, currently studying at Wharton, got full ride from Ross and Keenan Flagler. Again, the YouTube icons lead to YouTube links. When you get the session PDF, you can check them out. Kongbui scored 760. He didn't just get a full fellowship. He actually got $1,700 per month to study at Ohio Fisher overall. So I mean, people think about scholarships. He got paid to study over there. Again, we talked about Nishant. We talked about Pravi over here as well as Krishnakant. Again, you can see the money for full rides. Here's another case, and we've seen many more cases like this actually. Ayush scored a 710, really good score, went through the entire interview process, and he had a really good interview, but he was waitlisted by Ross. And he reached out to the school and said, hey, I thought we really connected during the interview. I felt the interview was really good. Why the waitlist? And they just simply told him, they said, your GMAT score is not high enough. Improved his GMAT score. Didn't even apply, just updated the GMAT score, just sent the updated score to schools. He got into both Ross and Columbia with scholarship. So from waitlist to scholarship, just because of an updated GMAT score. Nothing else, didn't even apply again. Same application. And here's a quote which I think applies way more than it did when John Fuller said this at Ross. He said, someone with a 770 is way more likely to get a financial award than someone with a 670. Why? Because the school's trying to buy that high GMAT score. Now let's talk about the third thing. The first two things people know of, they actually don't go into in depth. But the third thing is something that a lot of people don't even take into consideration. And this probably is the biggest reason, which is the delta in total earnings over a 10-year period. So when you think about, I'm going to compare two schools. One is Babson, which is my alma mater. I graduated from Babson. I absolutely love that school. It's the world's #1 school in entrepreneurship. And the second is MIT, which arguably is the world's #1 school in technology-based innovation. Now, these two schools, both of them are in Babson, both of them in Boston, I'm sorry, both of them 20 miles apart. So arguably, you'd say graduates from both these schools get access to a very similar kind of opportunities. Why? Because they're in the greater Boston area, or to a larger extent in the greater New England area. Now, when you look at the starting salaries from these two schools today, you see there's a delta of about $40,000. When you look at the average bonus, there's another delta of $20,000. Now, the kicker here is, this is the delta today. When I graduated in 2006, and again, I'm very old, this delta over here in 2006 was merely $20,000. Okay, so Babson was still at about 95,000, MIT was at about 115. So over the last 10 to 12 years, or 14 years, if you want to actually want me to remind myself of my age, companies have valued graduates from top B schools a lot more, and I think this delta, in my opinion, is going to go up. So if you really look at this and say, hey, I'm going to keep that average delta to be not 60,000 because you don't get a bonus every year, but to be about 45,000, then over a 10-year period, that adds about 450K. You add scholarships to it, you get a $500,000 number over a 10-year period. Okay, so overall, 3 reasons, $500,000 worth of delta. So if you're aiming for that 700, and a time will come during your preparation when your brain will tell you to give up. Tell yourself there's a reason why you're aiming for that 730 score. What value does it bring about? And that investment to go from, let's say, a 650 to a 730 or a 700 to a 740 is probably going to be the most profitable investment that you're going to put in your own for your own career. Okay. So with that, since we now do this, let's kind of really talk about, and I think let's kind of get this. How many of you have had this feeling to really say, man, I've prepared a lot for the GMAT, let me give up? Anyone over here? Yes, if you've had that feeling. No, if you haven't. It's like, man, this is getting too tough. Let's just give up. I've already improved 70, 80 points, 90 points. It's about 30% of you've already had this feeling, given that very few of you are preparing to take the GMAT in the next 30 days. Usually, this feeling comes when you're close to, your test taking date, within 30 days of your test taking. So, but still about 32% or 33%. That's a pretty good number over here. Okay, so with that, one thing that I want you to really take away from this webinar, one takeaway that I have, we're going to talk about 7 or 8, but the most important one out of this is, when it comes to acing the GMAT, it is about building ability. And the reason why I want you to remember this is because a lot of us, when we think about acing the GMAT, we think about the stuff at the bottom, which is, hey, I've got to be fast at answering questions. I need to figure out which section order do I need to worry about. I need to look at, hey, which questions to actually leave or get myself through a 3-hour long test. Those are important, but in the context of the overall success, your overall success on the test, that importance is governed by, or if I were to really tell you the relative importance, you should just look at the font sizes of acing the GMAT as building ability and the font size of everything else over here. Okay. So, and just to prove that point, I'm going to actually tell you, we're going to simulate GMAT attempts for 2 different students. And these are, this is going to be a rough simulation. The actual GMAT algorithm is a bit more complex, but it follows the same principle. So what we're going to do is, and again, just to really define 2 terms which we're going to use, which is accuracy and ability. What is accuracy? You take a quiz, you get 8 out of 10 questions right. That percentage of questions correct, 80% is your accuracy. Now, what is ability? Ability is just a comparative report. Ability, when you think about ability, think of rank. Okay, when someone says you have 80th percentile ability, what it means is in the context that they're talking about, you are among the top 20 percentile of students. When you say you have 90th percentile ability, in the context of this, you're in the top 10 percentile. So ability tells you how against what percentage of test taking population, or if you're talking about ability in weightlifting, overall population that competes for that weightlifting competition, what percentage are you better than? Okay, so let's kind of simulate an adaptive test, and this is in general how a computer adaptive test works. So what we're going to do is we're going to have difficulty level on the y-axis. So the higher you go on the y-axis, the more difficult a question becomes. And you have question numbers on the x-axis, and we're going to simulate two students. One's going to be like this greenish orangish line, and the other one's going to be the blue line. Again, I'm colorblind, so green and orange look the same to me, but I can identify blue. Now, let's talk about student one or case one. Student one or case one gets the first question. The first question in general in a computer adaptive test is around that median difficulty level. Gets that first question, gets that right. As a result, gets the second question, which is of a higher difficulty level. Now, you can really see we're going up on the y-axis. He gets the second question right as well. Gets a third question, which is of an even higher difficulty level. Gets that wrong. Now, as a result, he gets the fourth question, which is of a difficulty level, which is between question number 2 and 3. And how do you figure that out? You draw horizontal lines between from question number 2 and question number 3, and you can really see the fourth question is between them. Why? Because the test is trying to get an estimate of your ability. So he gets that question wrong or right, because it's a slightly lower difficulty level. Gets the fifth question, gets that question wrong. Now let's talk about case 2. Case 2 gets the first question, which is again of a very similar difficulty level, gets that wrong. Gets the second question, which is easier, gets that right. Gets the third question, which is of a higher difficulty level, gets that wrong. Gets the fourth question, which is easier, gets that right. And gets the fifth question right as well. Now, if we were to stop the test at this point, over here, which is at this point, if we were to end this test, it's clear, or rather, let me just get this. It is clear that who's doing better? If we stop the test over here, who would have a much higher score? Yes, case 1 is going to have a much higher. The blue dude. Yes, thank you. I prefer case 1. Again, I read better than I see colors, but thank you. Yeah, case 1 is going to be doing better. That's something which I think 90% of the class gets. The kicker here is why? What is causing the test to give case 1 or student 1 a higher score? What is the reason why the test awards student 1 a higher score? And again, I've removed broadcast results so that your responses are not biased by what others say, but I can see your responses. So please continue putting in your responses. And when I get about 20 responses, I'm going to broadcast results so you can see what others have written. 12 responses, 13 responses, 15, 21. Let me broadcast results, 23, 24. Okay, really, really good answers over here. So most of you really said because he's answering tougher questions, right? Yes, that is absolutely correct. And I love these answers. Why? Because it just shows as a test taking population, as a group of about 340 odd students over here, you are way more mature. Prior to this, I would get half the people saying that because he got the first few questions right. And I like this answer a lot better than the statement that says because he got the initial questions right. Why? Because initial questions is just an observation. It's not the cause. Getting difficult questions right is the cause. Okay. Now, let me ask this question. What's the delta in weight between a difficult and an easy question? What's the delta in weight? or what's the ratio of okay, so let's say, or rather, how many more in terms of percentage points? I think let's just purely look at this from a percentage standpoint, and I'm going to ask you to just put in your responses once more. A hard question versus an easy question. What's the delta? If you can put your answers in, you would overwrite this. Okay. So the exact question is, if I answer a hard question correctly versus if I answer an easy question correctly, how many more points am I getting for the hard question versus an easy question? Not sure. In the bell curve shape, approximately 30%. The bell curve shape is a probabilistic curve. It's not a point curve. Okay. All right. So a few more responses. 550 level is easy. 600 level, 600 to 650 is medium. And 700 to 800 is hard. Well, essentially it's easy, medium, and hard. We just call them 700 to 800. There's no 700 level question, by the way. Technically speaking, 700 is an aggregation of your abilities. There's no question which is tagged as a 700 level question, technically, if you look at it. Okay, so I have responses in 3 categories over here, and really good data. Thank you. And let me just add notes over here. And so I have group 1 who really say 30%, or I'd say who've said really 20%, 50%. Actually 4 categories. Group 2 who said 50% to 100. I'd call this 80%. Group 3 is actually, I'd call them 80 to 120%. And group 4 plus. And for those of you, so the correct answer over here, and again, we're comparing easy versus hard, okay? And the correct answer over here, based on our estimates, is this. So if you look at Scholarinium platform, what you're going to really see is an easy question gets about 4 to 5 points. On a difficult question, you get between 13 and 14 points. You can see the delta over there. If you look at the score estimate that you get from Scholarinium, it's way more accurate than even the official tests. Okay, so difficult versus easy, huge delta. That's why, and I'm going to prove this with data points over there. Okay. Now the other piece which is there, which is really interesting, is if you look at coming back to this case 1 didn't even get case 2 didn't even get the opportunity to answer difficult questions, correct? Right? If you look at the data point, case 2 was not even served difficult questions, whereas case 1 got 5 questions. Each one of these 5 questions was either at the average difficulty level or above the average difficulty level. So the key part over here when it comes to acing the GMAT, the key thing that you have to remember is that you have to overcome 2 challenges. One is want to make sure that the test serves difficult questions to you, and the second is then you've got to make sure that you answer them correctly. Why? Because that's the only way that you're going to get difficult questions served to you. Okay, so this was just some simulation. Now this is actually real data, which is from GMAT Prep. For those of you who've just started or started preparing for the GMAT this year itself, you probably are not familiar with this chart. This is a chart that we used to get in the old GMAT Prep software when the verbal section was 41 questions. So they would get a lot of analysis, which is where a lot of these weights came from. So we have a database of close to 3,000 GMAT Prep attempts, and we've done all sorts of AI on top of it. So what you see is GMAT Rep results of 2 different students, and when you look at attempts from question number 11, to question number 41, what you see is there's very little to choose between these two students. Their accuracy is fairly similar. Okay, the only difference over here is question numbers 1 and 2. This guy, case 2, got question 1 and 2 incorrect. Case 1 got the first 10 questions correct. Now, when you look at their verbal scores, they're very different. Case 2 or student 2 got a verbal score of V32, student 1 got a verbal score of V43. When you look at the delta over here, a verbal score of V43 is 97th percentile, which is 6,000th rank. A verbal score of V32 is 65th percentile, which is about 70,000 rank. Now, when you look at these two guys and you really say, hey, man, how many of you are really looking at this and saying, hey, GMAT's a really harsh test? How many of you think and say, hey, this is really harsh, 2 questions wrong and you know, I am off by about 70,000. If you think GMAT's a really harsh test, say yes. If you think it's not, say no, or you can really say it's a fair test. All right. Many of you, and this is kind of a predominant response that I really get, and this is something where looking at data and going from observation to inference is really important. Now, when it comes to the GMAT, it actually is one of the world's most, it's actually, I think, I don't know of a test that's better designed than the GMAT overall. Why? Because if you look at where most tests are coming along, they're actually converging towards the GMAT. The GMAT, with regards to prediction, with regards to its predictability of success in B school, is way higher, is way more predictable than the GRE is in a master's program or even in an MBA program or the SAT or ACT or with regards to your success in your undergrad program. And a lot of these tests are moving towards this. So as a test, the GMAT is a really fair test. One of the other things that people don't look at is that you can make 9 out of 31 mistakes and still get a 97th percentile. I mean, which test, if you look at the first guy got a V43, on which test can you get about 20% of the questions wrong and still get a 97th percentile? Very few tests out there, right? But people don't look at the fact that, hey, you can make that many mistakes and still get a really high score. Okay, so let's kind of understand why this happened, why student 2 got a 65th percentile and why student 1 got a 97th percentile. Let's kind of go back to this map of ours. So let's just clear the annotation. We're going to map case 2 first. So student 2 or case 2 got the first question, which is a median difficulty, got that wrong. Got the second question, which is about a 30th or 35th percentile level, he got that wrong as well. So when it came to the third question, the test served him about a 50-odd percentile level question. Now the test is not very wrong to serve him that. Why? For those of you, how many of you are math whizzes over here? So for those of you who are math whizzes, can you tell me, if you're a 90th percentile student, what is the probability that you get a 50th percentile question wrong and a 30th or 35th percentile question wrong, one after the other? So if you are a math whiz, what I'm really asking you is, what is the joint probability that you get a 50th, that a 90th percentile guy gets a 50th percentile and a 35th percentile question wrong, one after the other? If you do the math, you're going to find it's going to be less than 1 in 10,000. If you really look at the bell curve, some of you were talking about that bell curve over there, you're going to find it's less than 1 in 10,000. And so the test at this point is not very wrong, or is actually very, very precise to think that this guy is not a very bright guy. So as a result, the test gave him the third question, which is a 15th percentile level. He got that right. Give him the fourth question, which is about 25th percentile level, fifth question, 35th percentile level, sixth question, 50th percentile level, and so on and so forth. And the moment he got to that higher difficulty question, the guy started making mistakes again. Student 1 or case 1 got the first 4 questions right, got to 700 level questions by the fifth question, and then he maintained his accuracy. Okay, so some of you are saying luck can go really hard on an odd day. No, it can't. I mean, luck can go bad on one question, but again, if you understood probabilities, what you're going to find is a 90th percentile guy is not likely to get these 2 questions wrong. Now, even if a 90th percentile guy gets these 2 questions wrong, the test still gives him the opportunity to recover from it. The problem really is this guy, our student 2, continued to make mistakes as questions became more difficult. Now, when you look at the lens of accuracy, these guys look very, very similar. That's not how the GMAT looks at it. For GMAT, the lens, the metric that it looks at is your abilities. And when you look at their abilities, this is how these students look. Now, when you look at them from a lens, through a lens of ability, do they look very different to you? Do they look different? They look very different, right? And that's what the GMAT cares about, not your accuracy. There's an ability engine that's running within the test. It measures your SCCR and RC ability. It also measures your arithmetic and algebra abilities constantly, and it computes those ability scores and then gets you that overall GMAT score. Now, I'm going to put in another yes/no poll over here. I hope to get a few more responses than what I'm getting in the short answer poll. So how many of you have seen an ESR or an enhanced score report? How many of you have seen an ESR? Okay. If you put a question in the Q&A pod, we're going to ready send you a link to what an ESR is. Okay, here is Anubhav's. You'll see the response. See it in response to Anubhav's question, the link to ESR. So an ESR is an enhanced score report. So when you take the test and you get a certain score, you can order an ESR or an enhanced score report where you can get insights on how you did. And an ESR tells you what ability scores did you achieve. So these ability scores that you see over here, these are listed in the ESR. So you can really see how you fared in SC, how you fared in CR, how you fared in RC. By the way, you have to pay $30 to really get an ESR on top of the $250 or $275, depending on the region that you're in, that you pay for the test. And if you correlate your abilities, or if you do a regression analysis on your abilities to the end GMAT score, you're going to find that your R square, or the causative nature as we call it, is higher than 99.5%. Okay. Is ESR helpful to get to send to B schools? Absolutely not. They don't know how to look at it, by the way. But bottom line is, an ESR gives you insights. And when you look at those, you really see your GMAT score is a result of your abilities. So the question really is, what abilities does the GMAT measure? So when you think of that score out of 800, it measures, you get 2 scores. You get a quant and a verbal score. But these scores are not the causative scores. These scores are what we call as outcomes. What are the outcomes of? They are outcomes of your ability in arithmetic and algebra geometry. So in the ESR, you're going to get these abilities. On the verbal side, you're going to get these 3 abilities as well, SC, CR, and RC. So essentially, when you think about this score out of 800, the score out of 800 is a combination of these abilities in quant and these abilities in verbal. If you achieve these abilities in quant and verbal, in SC, sentence correction, CR is critical reasoning, RC is reading comprehension, these are 3 subsections in verbal, and correspondingly see the subsections in quant, you can actually predict your GMAT score if you have those abilities. Now, how many of you have taken a mock test over here? So, say yes if you've taken a mock test. Let's get a few more responses. Okay. About 48% of you have taken a mock test. How many of you, for those of you who have taken a mock test, know of your starting abilities? Only those people who have taken a mock test. How many of you know of your starting abilities in SCCR and RC? Of those of you who know have taken a mock test, how many of you can really tell me this is my ability in SC, 50th percentile, 40th percentile, 30th percentile, or 80th percentile in SC? Okay. Which mock test did you take that gave you these abilities, by the way? Which mock test did you take to get these abilities? Jamboree gives you SCCR and RC abilities? Yes, the only mock test that gives you these abilities is a Sigma X mock test. There's no other mock test that will give you these abilities over there. So even the official mock tests have stopped giving these abilities now. The only way to get these abilities is either you take the official GMAT and get the ESR, which by the way you can't take it because the online GMAT doesn't do that. The other way to do it is to take a Sigma X mock test. Okay. Every other mock test will give you your quant and verbal scores, so they'll probably tell you where you are over here, but when it comes to this level, they won't tell you where you are over here. They just don't have the engines to measure it. They just look at accuracy and give you a score. And which, by the way, is a huge misnomer. Okay. So how does scoring on GMAT work? If the actual GMAT has 5 independent engines and these engines calculate these 5 abilities independently. So how you do in SC has no impact on your CR ability. How you do in CR has no impact on your RC ability. For those of you who've taken a Manhattan mock test or a Jamboree mock test or an Experts Global mock test, go back, look at your attempts. What you're going to find is that this independence over here, this independence doesn't exist in those. If you get a 600 level SC question wrong, the next CR question is not going to be a 700 level CR question. It's going to be either a 600 level or a 500 level CR question. Why? Because there, these engines are dependent. That's not how the actual GMAT works. The other piece is when you combine these 5 abilities, you get an actual quant and an actual verbal score. All right. Perfect. So when you think about the GMAT score, ask yourself, what abilities am I aiming for? Why? Because, hey, acing the test is about building ability. Now, I showed you an algorithm. I showed you GMAT prep data. Now I'm going to show you actual data over here where on the GMAT, I'm going to demonstrate you can make mistakes as long as you prove to the algorithm that you have ability, you're still going to get a really good score. Here's an example of a student who went from a 520 to a 710, and this guy improved his verbal score and his quant score quite a bit. He went from a V17 to a V40, huge improvement in verbal. V40, by the way, is 91st percentile on GMAT verbal, and he went from a Q44 to a Q48. Okay, so when you look at this, you see his V40 over here, and the reason why I'm sharing this link is so that you guys can download this. And for those of you who want to really download his ESR, and look at this over here. But what you see is that this 91st percentile over here is composed of these 3 abilities. This is, by the way, a screenshot of an enhanced score report. You can go download that ESR and see that. Okay, and here is the link to his debrief, which I also shared in the short answer pod. Now, if you look at his ESR, what you're going to find is this guy made a ton of mistakes. The only thing is he did not make mistakes early on. He only made mistakes in difficult questions. He followed what we call as, a build, maintain strategy. So the first two blocks, he built his ability. He made a few mistakes, but not very many. By the time he came to this third block, and this is the third block over here, by the way, by the time he came to this third block, he was only served difficult questions. He made mistakes on those, but that did not, reduce his score a whole lot. And in the last block, he got half the questions wrong. Despite that, he was able to get to that 90th percentile. Why? Because he made mistakes on difficult questions. When you make mistakes on difficult questions, you still get a good score. The problem is when you start making mistakes on easy and medium questions. So Shweta, hopefully that answers your question, which is it better to get a harder and easy question wrong? Okay, it's if you have a choice, first of all, don't get any question wrong, but then first get to that level when the test is consistently serving you hard questions. Then even if you make a few mistakes, in this case half the mistakes, doesn't matter. Why? Because you're making those mistakes on half the questions. Now think about it this way, and this is where you have to think like a human being. First two blocks, because the algorithm works very much like how humans work. First two blocks, I've proven to you, if you are a human, I've proven to you that I can answer every easy question right. I can answer 90% of the questions right. And only when you give me hard and very hard questions do I start making mistakes. If that is the case, if you are a person who's serving questions, what would you do? Would you go back to easy and medium questions when you already have proof that this guy can answer them correctly? Would you go back to an easy or medium questions? No, you won't. Right? You won't go back to easy or medium questions. Why? Because you already have conclusive proof. So you would only continue to serve difficult questions. And you want to be in that zone where the test has no choice but to serve difficult questions. Why? Because that's when you maximize your score given your ability. So Divya says, how do we classify easy or hard question? You don't make that decision in the test. That is something that you prepare for going into the test. Okay. And that's where within an e-GMAT platform, we give you those stats right from the get-go. Within the first hour, when you take a quiz, we tell you what you're doing in easy, medium, and hard questions. And if you get the stats where you're saying, hey, I can really tell myself that 90, my accuracy in easy questions is 90%. My accuracy in medium questions is 80%, but in hard questions it's 60%. If you hit those levels, you are in that 90th percentile. Let me share some videos with you of students who've actually improved. So let's see how. So this is a case. Okay, here's another question over here, which is a question by Vishaka, I'm sorry. So Vishaka says, so can we invest more time and increase accuracy in the first few questions? It's a really good question. I want to understand. I want to ask, how many of you have the same question? Hey, can I spend more time on the first few questions then? And when you actually draw a conclusion, you always have to be wary of the assumptions you make. Okay. One of the biggest, and it's a really good question. It's a very natural question to ask, and I'm glad you asked this question. That, hey, should I invest more time in the first few questions to increase my accuracy? The first thing I wanted to tell you is a yes or no answer, and the answer to that is no, absolutely not. And then I'm going to tell you my reason, and the reason for that is that that conclusion that Vishaka is drawing has, and with a lot of your drawing is a flawed conclusion where it has an inherent assumption that if you spend more time on a particular question, your probability to answer that question increases. We actually did a ton of research on this, and given the fact that every month we get 1,000 new students, it allows, and we collect close to 600 to 800 data points on every student. It allows us to get a lot of data. Um, when we did our research, what we found was that every student has a sweet time to answer a question of a particular difficulty level, which we call as your tuck time. So, and we give this tuck time to you in the Scholarinium platform. If you spend more time than that tuck time, and let me repeat this, if you spend more time than that tuck time, your probability to answer that question correctly actually goes down. So spending more time, or in other words, spending more time is not a substitute to ability. If you have the ability and you spend an appropriate amount of time, you will get that question right. If you do not have the ability, you can spend all the time in the world. Your probability to answering that question right will not go up. Does that make sense? Again, as I said earlier, one thing that I want you to take away from this is acing the GMAT is building ability. Okay, nothing else. That's a really good question. And again, I want you to continue asking questions because overall, I call this as a very low risk environment, which by the way is again, and you'll get sick of seeing this, but I want to make sure that you do this. Okay, now with that, let's talk about your personalized study plan. Now that we have a good foundation on what the GMAT's all about, and what it tests and what are these abilities, then let's kind of talk about a personalized study plan. Pulkit has another question. It's a relevant question. Does the algorithm give you more points if you answer the same question quickly? No, there are no more points for timing. Okay. Dalpat says, as per the official guide, and again, I'm going to answer this one. It's a myth that the first 10 questions are critical and you should invest more time on that. This is something that I want you to keep in mind when you read the official guide. And if you're a good critical reasoner, you're going to actually be able to really figure this out. The official stance and the stance that the GMAT has always been this. One, each question, and I am going to repeat this, each question in the first 10 questions has no more weight than the same question if it were to appear elsewhere in the test. Essentially, what they're really saying is a question is a medium question or a question is a hard question, and where it appears in the test has no relevance to the number of points it carries. And that's absolutely true. You know, a question is an easy question regardless of whether you get it as question number 11 or question number 1. A question is a medium question regardless of whether it comes as question number 5 or question number 15. Okay. Lawrence Rudner, who actually was the original psychometrician who designed the GMAT, who took the GMAT from a paper-based test to an adaptive test, admitted after he left the GMAT in 2012, and you can look this up, Lawrence R. Rudner is his name. He admitted that there is a slight bias in the first 10 questions towards the importance that it has. Now he did that after resigning or after he retired from the organization. Okay. Again, Lawrence R. Rudner is the name. Leaving out questions unanswered impact your score. Do not leave out questions unanswered, Sriram. Just if you want, take wild guesses, and you can, if you take wild guesses, you can respond to 10 questions in a minute. Do not leave them unanswered. That's something that I can tell you. So with that, let's do a short answer poll, and I want you to tell me, what does a study plan do? Think hard and tell me, what should a study plan tell you? Okay, I have 21 answers. Let's get to about 30 answers. I have 30 answers now. Let me broadcast results. How to improve, what to do, when to do. Aim to improve ability. Okay, structure, focus on weak points. Okay. All right, so I want you to read what others have written, and maybe what your opinion is very similar. One of the things that I am a big believer of is statistical significance, or in other words, wisdom of crowd. Uh, um, okay, so I'm going to stop broadcasting results. So just keep this in mind as to what you guys have really written. Now, I'm going to tell you what a study plan should really do. Okay, it should answer 3 questions for you, and I want to make sure that you get this right. I'm going to share this PDF with you after the slide which says acing the GMAT is about building ability. This is probably the most important slide in this presentation. Excuse me. The first question it's going to answer is, how will I reach my target GMAT score? And those how, the answer to that is not really, okay, I'm going to study for 2 months and do that. The answer to that is, what ability scores am I aiming for to reach my target GMAT score? The second is, how much time do I need to put in? And for each one of you, that time is going to be very different. And the third, and so a lot of people will say, okay, this is, you answer these 2 questions. I think if I have good answers to these questions, I think I have a good study plan. Those are essential, but not sufficient. The most important question that a study plan should answer is, where do I need to put in this time? Am I going to study concepts? Am I going to learn application? Do I already know application? Am I going to refine to perfection? Or am I already there and all I need to do is just maintain my performance? And so the output of a study plan has to be a matrix, and I'm going to show what that matrix should look like, and a vector which tells you, which gives you good answers to each one of these, and you should be able to visualize your entire preparation once you have that study plan. And so I'm going to take a case study of 2 students. I'm going to call them Abby and Chase. Abby and Chase, and I'm going to show that both these students are students who are going to start from a score of 600. They want to get to a 740, and what you're going to find is how different their study plans are going to be. So Andrews, your question, for an average student, how long will it take to get to a 700 plus, is a question that I say I don't know, because that may not apply to you. So and this example will tell you that, but we can help you figure that out for you, and help you figure that out way more precisely. So there's Abby and Chase over here. Abby is someone who has a quant score of 42 out of 60 and a verbal score of 31. Now, and Chase is someone who's stronger in quant and consequently weaker in verbal. Both of them have a starting score of 600. And both of them want to get to that score of 740 over here. Now, a Q42 and a V31 isn't sufficient. It doesn't tell me how to plan. I actually need to be a lot more granular. So I take a sigma x mock and I get these abilities. So for Abby, you get a quant ability of Q42 and 42, so 40th percentile. So think of Abby as someone who's at around 40th percentile in quant, and Chase is someone around the 70th percentile in quant. On the verbal side, Abby is around the 60th percentile in all of these subsections, and Chase is around that 35th percentile. Now, the reason I took these percentiles to be very similar in verbal and quant, so for Chase it's all around 35th, for Abby it's all around 60th, is because otherwise you'd suddenly have a matrix of essentially 10 different numbers, or 12 if you look at the quant and verbal scores along with this, and it's very difficult to keep track of. So But in reality, you would have the matrix of 12 different numbers overall. Now, before we go forward, let's kind of figure out who do you relate more to. So let's kind of look at this. Actually, wrong poll question. Let me just get it get in the right poll question. Here is my poll question. Who do you associate with? Is it Abby or is it Chase? Hold on. Sorry about that. Who do you associate more with? Is it Abby or Chase? Okay, let's get a few more responses. I have 280 students here in the webinar, guys. Let's get more responses. Who do you associate more with? Is it Abby or Chase? I should have a neither option as well. But again, if you're stronger in quant than verbal, then it's Chase. If otherwise it's Abby. So I think just choose that. And what you see is half the class associates with Abby, the other half associates with Chase. So that's really interesting over here. And then a few who are really saying it's neither. And so the question really then comes down to is, even though both Abby and Chase are starting with that score of 600, do you think they need to achieve the same quant and verbal scores to get to a 740, put in the same amount of time, and most important, study the same content? The answer to each one of these questions is no, they don't. Okay, so let's kind of think about how Abby and Chase would go about creating their study plan. What they would go to is they'd go to gmatplanner.com. It's an AI-driven utility that we created, which allows each one of you to create your study plan in a short amount of time. And you can go to gmatplanner.com or you can go to our PSP tool and essentially schedule a session with one of our experts. So if you're an e-GMAT student, if you're a paid student, you should be able to access this from your dashboard. It's included in your subscription. If you're a registered user, then you can actually go to the PSP link over there and get access to the session. So here is the link to GMAT Planner over here that you can get to. Okay, now we're just going to focus on Abby over here. Okay, remember Abby was someone who's not as strong in quant but was stronger in verbal, and so this is the output, one of the intermediate outputs of GMAT Planner, where it says, hey Abby, your starting score is Q42. Okay, you're at 42nd percentile. You want to get to a Q48 if you want to get to a 740. So it has AI. It figures out the most optimal way to get to a 740 for Abby. And then, since your starting score is V31, which is 60th percentile, you should get to a V42, which is around that 92nd percentile overall, or 96th percentile on GMAT verbal, to get to a 740. Now, when you think about your target scores, you've got to look at this and understand. Now, when you think about a Q48 and a Q42 or Q48, what is your takeaway from that improvement, a Q42 to a Q48 over here? What is your takeaway from this? Okay, you've got to increase your ability. What else do you infer from this? Okay, it is reasonably massive, I would say. Someone saying solve more difficult questions. Okay, what else? Think more. Okay, minimal improvement. Now, what is it? One of the things when you think about, when you put a stake in the ground, it's very important to understand not just what you will do, but also what you won't do. And that's really, really important. Okay. And when you think about a Q48, what a Q48 is not, it's not a Q50 or a Q51. So what it means is that Abby does not need to master the hardest questions in quant. Okay, it means she doesn't need to do this. Why? Because she's not aiming for a Q49 or a Q50. All right, and then there's someone said 80-20 rule. On the verbal side, however, most, and I say most, more than 50%. On the verbal side, she probably needs to be able to answer most hard questions. When you build a study plan, how many of you draw such inferences? How many of you do this? We've not even built a study plan, by the way. We are starting to build a study plan. This is the first step here. Kind of, but not similar. Yes, and that's really important to understand. What is that Q48? What is that V42? What does this mean with regards to how am I going to study? What am I going to focus on? What am I not going to focus on? Okay, now let's move forward. Let's talk about Abby and Chase a bit more. As next steps, what this planner also gives you is how much time is she going to spend on every subsection. I'm going to zoom this in so that you guys can see this a bit better. And again, this is a screenshot, so portions of it may not be legible, but this is a screenshot right out of GMAT Planner. What you see on the left-hand side over here are starting abilities. So in SC, her starting ability is 59th percentile. She needs to get to that 94th percentile. On arithmetic, her starting ability is 42nd percentile. She needs to get to that 70th percentile or so. Okay, and what you see is the amount of time that she needs to spend in SC, in CR, in RC. You get a time estimate for SC, CR, and RC, and arithmetic and algebra over here. How many of you, those of you who have a study plan, and I think a good number of you, have these precise time estimates? Very few of you, as you guys can really see. Very few of you have such precise time estimates. Now, let's talk about Chase now. With Chase, again, he's very strong in quant, not as strong in verbal. Again, needs to get to a Q50, needs to get to a V40. Okay. So, because he's already there in quant, he's not going to spend as much time in quant, but he needs to spend a lot longer in every subsection in verbal. So he's weaker. So even though he's not aiming for as high an ability, but because his starting points over here are a lot lower in verbal, as a result, in SC he has to spend almost 3 weeks. In CR he has to spend almost 3 weeks. And similarly in RC. Now, how many of you are saying, okay, how do I figure out what does 3 weeks mean? How does it translate into hours? How does the system know it's 3 weeks and it's not 2 weeks? What if I'm studying all the time? The system does take into account. It asks you this question: how many hours can you spend on a weekday? How many hours can you spend on a weekend? And accordingly, it calculates this time. In fact, you even get to a screen where you can choose the number of hours on a per day basis. Okay, so where can you find this planner? You can find this planner over here. So let's kind of analyze this over here a bit more. So for Chase and Abby, different target quant and different target verbal scores. But the big point over here is not the fact the target quant and target verbal scores, but the bigger point over here is how long do they need to focus on 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 quant and verbal to achieve these scores. For example, for Chase, he needs to spend 50% more time than Abby to get to a V40. Similarly, Abby needs to spend twice as much time on as Chase does to get to a Q48. For those of you who in your work are involved in planning and or program planning or project planning, tell me what happens when you start a project or a program with bad estimates. What happens? Or bad assumptions. What happens when you start a program or a plan with bad estimates? It gets worse. You rush through things, right? You get poor outcomes. Your score doesn't improve. And which is why getting that personalized study plan is really important. Why? Because you need to have realistic estimates. And which is where, when you ask how long does it take to get to a 700, my answer is I don't know, but I can help you figure out how much will you take to get a 700. Okay. But that's not where the biggest difference is. The biggest difference is where they actually spend this time. And to do that, what I'm going to really tell you is this chart. This probably is one of the most important charts that you should know of, which is what we call as various stages of learning. And the y-axis, what you see is ability improvement, and on the x-axis is the stage of learning that you are in. Okay, so in any subsection, and a subsection has SC, number properties, word problems. In fact, you can even go within a subsection, and the same rule applies. So in number properties, you can go in even odd, in primes, in LCM GCD. In critical reasoning, you can go in assumption questions, or you can go in boldface questions, and the same rule would apply. So if you know the concepts, you get to that 25th percentile ability. Once you've learned application well, which means, hey, you know the concepts and you have a solid way to apply those concepts while solving a question, you know what you need to do in step 1, what do you need to do in step 2, step 3, you get to that 50th percentile ability. Once you've mastered that approach, which means that you have a solid approach, you have clarity on most of the concepts, and most is about 70 to 80%, you start to hit that 70th percentile ability. And then when you kind of fill those little holes over there, that's when you start to hit that 90th percentile ability. And then from there on, all you need to do is practice to maintain that performance. Now, one of the things that you should take away from this is, depending on where you are, you need to focus on different things. One of the a common question that I see in the Q&A part, and I think a lot of you think about this to really say, hey, I am going to, my strategy to ace the GMAT is I'm going to practice a ton of questions. How many of you think about it, acing the GMAT that way? If I practice 100 questions in SC, it's better than practicing 50. If I practice 200, I'm going to be better than where I was at 100 questions. If I practice 400, I'm going to be better than where I was at 200 questions. Yes, it's a typical Indian way of approaching the test. It's a typical way of approaching any test, actually. It's not just Indian. It's also American. Why? Because most tests are not non-adaptive. For those of you who've taken the CAT, which is an Indian equivalent of the GMAT, that's how the CAT works. You practice, and practice. Let me ask this. How many of you have done that? How many of you have practiced like 400 questions in SC or RC and have figured out, hey, the improvement stops? How many have done that? Practice a ton of questions and figure out, hey, I hit a plateau. I don't improve with more practice. Sometimes I actually go down. And the problem is stages of learning. If you are over here, when you practice starts here and here. If you essentially are here or here, when you continue to practice, here is what's going to happen. You're going to go up slightly, then you're going to stay there. You go down slightly over here, then go up, go down. You're going to reach the zigzag, and you're going to continue over here. And when I say over here, it's around that 50th percentile mark over there. Continue practice, you're not going to go beyond that. And this is something which happens. Score plateau is a term that we coined about 5 years ago. And how to overcome score plateau. Okay. So with that, I want to talk about this piece over here as to where does Abby spend her time. And you think about Abby, you know her starting abilities over here. So if you're Abby, why don't you tell me where will you spend your time? Where do you think Abby needs to spend her time? At which stage? You see the stages on the top, you see the SCCR and RC for sentence correction. Where does Abby spend her time? At which stage of learning? Master application, yes. Abby knows the concept. She's at 60th percentile in SCCR and RC. So she's not going to go study the concepts. There's no point in her studying the concepts. She's not going to spend a ton of time studying the concepts. In fact, she's going to start with mastering application and refining to perfection. Okay. And which is where you can also appreciate why do we say that to hit that 90th percentile or 94th percentile, Abby needs about 2 weeks per subsection and not 3 weeks that Chase needs. Now, when it comes to quant, where would Abby spend her time? She's starting at that 40th percentile. She's going to spend her time in these two stages. She's not going to focus on refining to perfection. Why? Because she's not aiming for that 90th percentile in quant. She's not going to aim for the most challenging questions. Okay. All of this is while building the study plan. Let me ask another question. How many of you have this clarity when you build a study plan A? And if you're using a resource, how does that resource allow you to do that? Does it have a separation between concepts and application? Does it have a separation between application and mastering application and then refining to perfection? By the way, if you built any ability, you're going to figure out this is how you go about building any ability. This is not unique to just the GMAT. You want to build weightlifting? This is how you go about doing this. You want to become a marathon runner? You've got to get your step right first. You've got to make sure that your foot is landing properly. Otherwise, after 5 miles, you're going to start to get injuries. This is how building any ability works. Now for Chase, life is very different. Chase is starting at a very low point. He has to spend a ton of time in learning concepts and application. And then he's not going to spend a whole lot of time in refining to perfection and maintaining. So, and that's why you can now see why does Chase need 3 weeks on SC, 3 weeks on CR, 3 weeks on RC. He has this additional steps over here. He has this additional step over here. And Chase, while Chase is going to spend a considerable amount of time practicing, but he's not going to spend nearly as much time practicing as Abby is going to spend. Why? Because again, his aim is not aiming for that uber high verbal percentile. Chase is already at 72nd percentile and in quant. He's not going to focus on concepts and application. All he needs to do, he needs an analytics platform to tell him which areas does he need to focus on, and a good chunk of his time is going to be spent on refining to perfection in those areas. He knows everything in quant. So once you go back, try making this map for your preparation. Do this. You will get such clarity about your preparation that you know how to go about acing the test. But the key takeaway that I want you to have from this is don't take anyone's study plan. Build a personalized one for you. Create those metrics and only then would you be able to get to that 740 score. Now, this is just the beginning. This is just study plan creation, and you can see the kind of analysis over there. So Saqib says, don't you need practice to learn and master applications? No, Saqib, you do need practice, but not blind practice. You need what we call as a deliberate, methodical approach to practice. And we're going to talk about what is that deliberate, methodical approach in about 10 minutes. So that's a great question, Saqib. And this shows that you're thinking about it. So keep on, I'd love to see more such questions over here. So it says, the thing that I want you to really say is, even though Abby and Chase, same starting scores, same target score, but despite that, their study plans are really different. What aspects they focus on, they're very different as well. I think we've already asked this question, so I'm not going to ask this question over here. And again, this says right to run with our GMAT. I'd say it's much more efficient to schedule a session on PSP so that you guys can get that personalized experience overall. Okay, so let's focus on how do you build ability, and just to summarize what we have learned so far. We've talked about why you need a high GMAT score, how GMAT's a test of ability. We've talked about the personalized study plan, but I think the focus now is going to be these 4 stages of learning and that 1 stage of maintenance. Okay, learning concepts, learning applications. Application is method on how to approach, mastering application, and then refining to perfection. Let's do a poll question over here, and again, you can really see how these stages of learning are correlate with abilities. How many of you put in, and this question is only for those who spent 25 to 30 hours studying either any subsection, whether it's SC or number properties or word problems or algebra. How many of you are stuck at 60th percentile if you've spent 25 hours? How many of you are stuck at that 60th percentile and are unable to get to that 90th percentile? All right, about 77% of you are stuck at this. So let's kind of look at this, and we're going to solve a question to demonstrate this. So why is it that, and this is an example of sentence correction, but this applies to every subsection and on the GMAT. Why is it that people don't improve beyond the 60th percentile? Okay, so I'm gonna compare 2 students. So and when you look at 60th percentile, you're talking about the top 80,000 people who take the GMAT. When you think about the 90th percentile, you're really looking at the top 20,000 students who take the GMAT. Okay, both a 60th and a 70th percentile student as well as a 90th percentile student spend similar number of hours studying for SC. Their starting abilities is also similar, and think about capability. A lot of people really say, hey, I'm unable to improve because I don't have the capability. I'm a firm believer, if you have the wherewithal, if you have the attitude, pretty much everyone in this world has the same number of neurons in our brain. So I'm a firm believer in human deliberation versus capability. So how does a 60th percentile guy think versus how does a 90th percentile guy think? But one thing you probably agree with me is that 90th percentile is almost perfect. It's about achieving that level of perfection. And if you want to get to that level of perfection, you have to worry about granularity. So how a 90th percentile guy thinks is very different from how a 60th percentile guy thinks. A 60th percentile guy really thinks about GMAT SC is about learning 8 major error types. And one of these error types that this person thinks about is this last one over here, where he considers meaning to be an error type. A 90th percentile student looks at it very differently. A 60th percentile student says, I'm going to use splits, and then wherever I get stuck, I might just use meaning over there. When you're studying, how many of you over here have studied sentence correction using an online course or the Manhattan GMAT sentence correction book? How many of you have studied SC using an online GMAT course other than e-GMAT, let me be very specific, uh, or the Manhattan GMAT sentence correction book. If you've done that, what you're going to find is when you're learning, not while you're practicing, you probably get 7 to 10 feedback points. In the Manhattan GMAT SC book, end of chapter exercises about 7 to 8, or at the most 10 end of chapter exercises over there. Am I correct? It's about 7 to 10, no more than that while learning. You may do practice questions in on GMAT Club, but while learning, that's kind of what you think about, what you get as feedback. And then for those of you who've spent about 30 to 40 hours, this is how your split in learning versus practice is. If you've spent 40 hours, you'll probably spend 12 to 15 hours learning the content and about 25 plus hours practicing the content. 60th, 70th percentile people, am I correct with this time split over here? This is the time split for learning. This is the time split for practice. If you spend 40 hours doing SC and if you're still stuck at that 60th percentile, that's kind of where you spend your time, right? Our 90th percentile guy studies very differently. For him, GMAT SC is about 200 major error types. They belong to these 7 categories, but there are 200 major error types, not 8 major error types. A 90th percentile guy uses meaning as the primary method. If you go look at debriefs on GMAT Club Share GMAT Experience, you're going to observe two things. One is way more debriefs by GMAT students than by students from any other prep company. The second is, regardless of where the student is from, they talk about meaning in SC. They talk about pre-thinking in CR or comprehending the argument in CR. A 90th percentile student gets between 80 to 120 feedback points during preparation. And the biggest piece because of this is the time spent learning is about 60%. The time spent practicing is about 40%. And when I talk about learning versus practice, learning is pure learning with embedded practice in there. But a practice is pure practice. There are no lessons while you're doing practicing. Okay. So just to really tell you how does that work for an e-GMAT student, when you look at the stages of learning, this is learn concepts, learn application, master application, and maintain performance. The number of feedback points that you really see over here, you can see that there's a lot of front loading that's happening in the e-GMAT platform. And the reason is if you do this right, you don't need that much feedback over here. Okay. And of course, you don't need that much feedback once you hit that 90th percentile. So we're going to really talk about why do we say we have these 200 odd concepts. And to do that, I'm going to help you. I'm going to have you solve an SC question. But again, look at these points. About 150 overall points of feedback. Each point takes into account multiple items to give that feedback that's personalized to you. If you work with a private tutor, you probably don't get half as much feedback with a private when you work with a private tutor. And we're going to come back to the slides as we go there. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to solve a fun SC question. Let's get to that. I'm going to put in a poll question. I'm going to give you a good chunk of time to do this. So the way we do this is I'm not going to time you guys. I want you to select this choice which says still solving. That way, when 80% of you choose another option other than still solving, I know that you're done with this. So I want about 100 people to say still solving. That way I know I have a statistically significant number of people who've chosen another option other than still solving. So I'll call time. I have 58, 59, 67 guys, 100 people staying still solving. Yeah, you can't see the question because I'm not showing the question. I'm not going to show the question till I get 100 people to say, or at least 80 people to say still solving. It's for your own benefit, guys. All right, I have 93 people who are there who posted a response. Let's just go over here. Here is the question. Take your own sweet time. And again, your timing is going to be governed by the timing of this group. All right, how many of you can see the question here? Let's just, I'm going to put in a yes no poll. A couple of you are saying can't see the question. Pretty much everyone, it seems, can see the question, guys. So if you can't see the question, just join again and the problem should sort out by itself. And again, as I said, I'm going to give you ample time. So perfect, thank you. All right, guys, 80% of the class is done. Let's get those responses in. Not 8%, I should have said 80% done. Sorry about that. Okay, 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll and broadcast the results. So here's how you guys polled. Choice C was very popular. 47% of you chose choice C. Let's kind of understand. I'm going to analyze this question in detail. So I'm going to tell you why a certain answer choice is correct and incorrect. So, but I'm kind of jumping the gun here slightly just to really get those inputs in. For those of you who chose choice C, only choice C, let me say, only choice C, why did you choose choice C? Why did you choose choice C? Okay, well, if I'm the one who's giving the question and I'm saying meaning, so meaning would be an answer. Okay. Meaning was explained better Parallelism. Okay, let's kind of look at this. Looks relevant. Sounds correct. Least awkward. We're going to talk about awkwardness. It makes the most logical sense. Good. Intending meaning was apt. We're going to talk about aptness over here. Good. Okay. That is really good. Resolves the subject verb errors. Okay. Some of you have talked about idioms. Still talking about idioms. C's meaning matches the questions most. Let's look at this. So that's good. Thank you. And again, I have enough data over here. And again, at e-GMAT, we are suckers for data. So nice thought, flow of thought, and grammatically sound, and blah, 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 blah. Okay. So let's kind of look at this and see how we're going to do this. Were you able to find good splits in this question? Were you able to do this? Find good splits there? Yes, no? Okay, a lot of you were able to find good splits. That's good. What are splits? Okay, the splits are these, what you see over here, where you say, hey, I'm going to scan the answer choices. I'm going to figure out the difference between answer choices. How many of you were able to use these splits? I'm going to move this poll over here. Yes, you were able to find some splits. But how many of you were able to use these splits and get into the correct answer? How many of you were able to do that? A good chunk of you were. Good. Let's kind of see how I use the splits. Okay. If you are able to use these splits, most likely you've answered this question incorrectly. When it comes to difficult questions, and this is something which we're going to demonstrate with a lot of clarity in next weekend's webinar on sentence correction, is that when it comes to difficult questions, splits become really difficult. And they're not a reliable way to get to the right answer. So again, the way, let me ask a slightly different question. And again, I'm going to digress a bit, so forgive me for that. But why does the GMAT have sentence correction as a subsection? Or in other words, what does GMAT sentence correction test? What does GMAT sentence correction test? Okay, comprehension, meaning, writing, logic plus grammar, clear intended meaning, logic plus grammar. Good. So lots of people saying grammar, lots of people saying meaning, or ability to form sentences properly. Okay. Then let me ask another question. And again, this is building upon the prior answer. So why is the sentence correction as a subsection there on the test at all? Why is the sentence correction as a subsection there on the test? Why is it there? What purpose does it serve? But if you say the test, the ability to comprehend, reading comprehension does that. Okay. Critical reasoning does that way better. And I get some really good answers. Managers need to accurately convey information. No ambiguity. Effective communication. Yes, that's why it is. It's effective and precise communication. Okay. You know, and that's kind of where I want to make sure you understand this. Your managers, the best CEOs in the world, they're not grammarians. They are the best communicators. They are the most precise communicators. And that's why GMAT SC is there. It's not a test of grammar. In fact, we've hired many grammarians who failed on GMAT SC. We've hired logical thinkers who are the best GMAT SC experts. Okay. Don't learn GMAT sentence correction from a grammarian, because you're likely going to go the hard path. So let's kind of look at this over here. And let's solve this in a very logical fashion. Here is the first and the original answer choice. And what I want you to do is I want you to read this sentence by strategically pausing at appropriate points. And I want to make sure that you understand the meaning completely, because I'm going to show you how to do this on the next slide. We're going to get to the correct choice. So let's kind of look at this. And you see choice A over there. This is what we call as the meaning analysis method. So what this sentence is saying is the church coined the date February 14th as Valentine's Day with an ulterior motive. You see how I've kind of really indented this part? The church coined with an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration of some Lupercalia is claimed by a few experts. Okay, so till now what I'm saying is the church coined this with an ulterior motive, and that's something that's claimed by a few experts, but it is celebrated on this day. So the but is a contrast word to honor the anniversary of Valentine's death or burial is the more prevalent belief. So when you think about meaning analysis, when you think about what is it that the author wants to communicate, why we started with communication, remember? The meaning from this sentence that you have to infer is one is that, hey, the author talks about two claims which are related to the celebration of February 14th as Valentine's Day. Claim one is that the church designated it with a specific motive, and that motive is called ulterior. Claim two is that it's to honor the anniversary of Valentine's death or burial. And then claim one is by entity one, which is a few experts, and claim two is the more prevalent belief. Okay. There's another piece over here. Does the author have a belief in this? Does the author have a belief in this? Does the author really say, hey, I believe in claim one versus claim two? No, the author has no belief in this. All he's merely stating are facts that, hey, claim one is by a few experts, claim two is a more prevalent belief. Okay. So just to summarize this over here, what I want you to do is I want you to mark all the claims that you were able to extract when you solved this question. And if you were not able to extract something, then you should not mark that. Or rather, I would say mark the ones that you could not identify. Is it 1, 2, or 3? So the question that I have is, what is it that you couldn't identify? And this is a multiple response question. So if you couldn't identify 1 and 2, you can choose both 1 and 2. If you couldn't identify 2 and 3, you can choose both 2 and 3. And if you were able to identify all three of them, you don't choose anything. And when we were talking about communication, it's about your ability to extract this piece of information. The question is, which ones were you able to identify, which ones were you not able to, and if any of these claims, so this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, and if any of these insights in 3, so 1 has one thing, 2 has 2 things in there, 3 also has 2 things in there. If any of these you weren't able to identify, then you should mark them. And what you really see over here is so many people were not able to identify claim 3, the ones that were not able to identify claim 1, and those were not able to identify claim 2. Okay, I want you to choose yes if you were able to identify every claim. On top, choose yes if you were able to identify every claim out there while solving the question, not when I explained it to you. While solving the question, 59 of you say you were able to identify every claim. Despite that, only 26 got this correct. Only 26 got this correct. Let's kind of really see the correct answer. And I'm going to ask this question again. But if you're able to understand all three, you are good for this. You can understand the meaning of the sentence. If you're not able to understand this, you need to build the meaning-based skill set. Forget about grammar. You first need to understand how to extract meaning. And the way you do that is by making sure that you pause at the right points and by using what we call as a strategic pausing technique. Okay, so let's continue our solution using this meaning-based method, and we're going to analyze the errors that are there in the original sentence. So again, this is the same indented view. What you see is the subject verb over here. The church is a subject. Coined is the verb. Okay, the church coined the date February 14th as Valentine's Day with an ulterior motive to is a purpose word to Christianize the pagan celebration of blah blah blah, is claimed. That part is claimed by a few experts. So when you look at this verb over here, what you really see is, hey, I have this verb, but my subject for this verb is missing because there's no subject for this verb. But it is celebrated on this date to honor with a purpose. Valentine's death or burial is the more prevalent belief. Again, this is a verb. I don't see a subject for this as well. So in my original choice, I have two errors. One is both those errors are the subjects are missing for this verbs. Okay. So now that we've done the meaning analysis, now that we've done the error analysis, let's kind of analyze all the options. And again, this is how you guys polled over here. Remember, choice B was every choice has more than 10 responses. Okay. So we're going to go towards choice B. Now on the top is the original choice. Now you're going to see choice B. Choice B says, while with an ulterior motive to Christianize, a few experts do claim that the church coined blah blah blah, but the more prevalent belief is, okay, is blah blah blah. Okay, why is it wrong? Why is this choice wrong? Why is this choice wrong? What modifier? Why is this choice wrong? Okay. When you look at this over here, you know, what you really see is very few people are truly using the meaning-based approach. In the original choice, who had the ulterior motive? Who had the ulterior motive in the original choice? The church. Who has the ulterior motive over here? Experts. Yes. Is that the same? Is that the same? No, it is not the same, right? If you were a boss who wanted to communicate the original meaning and you communicated this, your team would go wrong. Okay. In this case, so it's wrong. Why? Because it illogically suggests that experts present their claim. Raj says, but the experts can also have a motive. Yes, they can, but is that what the original choice suggested, Raj? Is that what I intended to claim as an author? Is that what I wanted? The original choice can be wrong, yes, and it is wrong. The subjects are missing, but not from a meaning standpoint. No. Okay. Yes, OA gives you the choice gives you the intended meaning. Okay. Sometimes you have to infer it, but it gives you the intended meaning. All right. Let's go towards choice C, the most popular choice. Again, remember over here. What's wrong with choice C? Choice C is not your correct answer. Most of you chose this. What is wrong with choice C? Read this again. What pronoun error? There is no grammatical error in choice C. Yes, those of you who are now saying experts believe, you are absolutely correct. What choice C is saying is, while a few experts claim that the church coined blah 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 blah, their more prevalent belief. Who does their refer to? It really says that their claim is one, but their belief is the other. It's really saying that hey, claim one and claim two, the one which is over here, they are not by different group as was communicated by the original choice, but they are by the same group of people. One is what they claim, the second is what they actually believe in. Can you see that? Can you see this over here? While a few experts claim that the church coined this, they're more, who's they're referring to? The same experts. Why did you choose this answer choice? And if you got the meaning correct? If in the original meaning, this was by two different groups of people, and if you didn't, that's good. If you missed the pronoun, then you did not go through your meaning checklist while you were doing this. This means you're not following the meaning-based approach. Okay, if you follow the meaning-based approach, you should have identified these three things while choosing the correct answer. You should have gone through the meaning checklist. You did not do that. Okay. There's nothing grammatically wrong about this. Grammatically, this is a beautifully constructed sentence. It just doesn't communicate the meaning that I wanna communicate. Okay. Now let's look at choice D. Choice D was also very popular. 15.6 or 22 of you chose choice D. Choice D is here. The church coined blah 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 with an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration of this, as claimed by a few experts. But its celebration on this day is to honor. Now, when you think about this part and read this using an RC hat, and just you really say, but its celebration is to honor. Okay, what do you infer from this? Who is making that statement? Is it experts or is this author? Who is making this statement? The author. It's the author. Did the author make a claim in the original answer choice? No. No. Okay. Now imagine if you were a manager who was presenting something to a director and you were really saying X says this, Y says this, but you messed up the language, and instead of saying Y says this, you present it in a manner where it says that you concur with Y's opinion, which might be completely wrong. What do you think would happen to your job? What do you think would happen to your job? That's the communication. And I see a comment over here which says, Vikas says, why are we basing our assumption on the question unless you know it's right? Because that's how GMAT SC is structured. And if you want to really see more evidence of this, come attend our next SC session. We're going to give you 5 official questions. In 4 of them, you're going to find that there are 3 grammatically correct options, but they're wrong. Why? Because they communicate the wrong meaning. It's not that the meaning that they communicate is not logical. It's just it's the wrong meaning. Again, GMAT SC is not about grammar. It's about communication. Okay. Okay, and as for some of you have already said, as claimed by a few experts, it's not very clear whether it is the action of the church coining the date or the intent to Christianize. So that's something that's not very clear. But the other piece why it's also wrong is that it implies that the author agrees with the belief, which is not there in the original meaning. So Shweta says, can the correct choice have the wrong grammar but the correct meaning? Yes. Can choice A have the wrong grammar but the correct meaning? No, it won't. Shweta, a correct choice will have the right grammar and the right meaning, which is what we get to our correct answer, which is choice E. And a lot of you, why did you reject choice E? How many of you really said, hey, this passive voice over here is claimed by a few experts. It's passive voice, or a sentence starting with that. So what's wrong with starting with that? What's grammatically wrong? What's grammatically wrong with passive? And as someone who's a sucker for data, this is the problem that I have when people really believe in these things, where when you bring stats into GMAT SC or GMAT CR, where some people really say being is never going to be a correct answer. No, there are but 7 instances where being is where being is there in the correct answer choice. Or passive voice is you're not going to find passive, or passive voice is always wrong in SC. It's wrong many a times, but an answer choice is not wrong because it's in passive voice. It just statistically happens to be that way. So you don't, and again, if something statistically happens, doesn't mean that it's causing it to be wrong. Okay. An uncommon construction is not wrong if it communicates the right meaning. And you say passive is not accepted on the GMAT? I can show you a few examples where passive is a part of the correct answer choice. I mean, is passive voice something that exists in grammar? It's a way of expression. Is passive voice a way of expression? Yes, it's a way of communication. That's why the word passive voice exists. Why would the GMAT not accept it? Have you ever asked this question? Why? Understand causality, not statistics while you're studying verbal. No. If you want to learn statistics, study stat. Not while you're studying SC. So let's look at why this is the correct answer. That the church coined is claimed. So the church coined is a subject verb player. That is a subject over here is claimed by a few experts, but the more prevalent belief is it is celebrated on this date to honor. So when you think about the meaning communicated by this answer choice communicates the two claims. It tells you the two claims. The claim 1 is designated by the church and with a specific motive. Claim 2 is to honor the anniversary of Valentine's death or burial. Claim 1 is made by a few experts. Claim 2 is made by a different group, which is the most prevalent belief. Okay. Raj says, shouldn't the belief is that it. So Raj is saying, shouldn't you have a that? Actually, let me change the annotation. And again, guys, if you have questions, if you want me to take those questions, put them in Q&A pod. That way I know it's a question. What Raj is saying is, shouldn't there be a that over here? If you were to really create the most beautiful construction, there should be. But does it create a subject verb a disagreement? Do I have a missing subject or a missing verb? Is there? No. The second piece Divya has, and that's a great question, Divya. She says, but the more prevalent belief is it is celebrated. Is the author providing an opinion over here? Is the author really saying that he believes in this belief when he says, but the more prevalent belief is? Is the author saying that? That it is his belief? No. The author is saying the more prevalent belief is this. Divya, does that help? Divya, in the Q&A pod, if you can say yes, so that I can really say that it helps you. And again, if you have a confusion, you really say, let's kind of build a parallel sentence. And usually the confusion is going to go away. When you make this statement, the most prevalent belief, the more prevalent belief is that the economy is going to open up in July. Are you saying, I think the economy is going to open up in July? Are you saying that? Are you expressing an opinion? No, you're not expressing an opinion. You're merely communicating information. And which is where, when you read a lot of news, what you're going to really say is they're merely communicating news and not providing their views, which is why, even though it may seem like that they're providing their views, they can provide false information and get away with it. If I say it is believed that we will have rain today, I'm not putting a stake in the ground. All I'm doing is communicating information. If it doesn't rain, you can't blame me. If I say it is certain that we will have rain today, and then if it doesn't rain, you can come and blame me. Or if I say it is clear that it will rain today. Parts as such passive won't really be user managers to communicate. They're often confusing, or listener takes time to interpret. No, Parsh. A passive voice, while not often used, why? Because managers don't want to be ambiguous. Managers will use it because it serves a purpose. If I say it is believed that this is going to happen, what I'm trying to tell you is I don't know what's going to happen. Okay, but here is a piece of information that I want to communicate. Think about how many of you have been through the recession? How many of you have been through a recession in the past? How many of you are old enough to have gone through the recession? Or this is a communication that you're seeing right now. Okay, so when you go through a recession, how many times have you seen this? It seems it is believed that, hey, the economy is going to go into a downturn and all of that stuff. The manager is saying this, saying, I don't know what's going to happen. That's kind of the general belief. I'm communicating this to you. And so on and so forth. This is a language which is used with a purpose. Managers don't like to use it often because they want to be more certain. But when they don't want to be certain, they will use it. It's a tool. So don't think it's going to be wrong always. But again, earlier on when I really said GMAT SC test 200 concepts, when you combine subject verb with sentence structures, can you really see those wealth of constructs which leads to these 200 concepts? Can you see those wealth of constructs over here? You can have a subject verb in a simple sentence, or you can have a subject verb where subject and verbs are separated by clauses. Those clauses can have comparisons and so on and so forth. And which is why it's really important to essentially study those sentence structures while you're studying the concepts. If you don't know how to break a sentence, if you don't get into the habit of breaking a sentence, then what is going to happen? You get into practicing questions and you continue to make the same mistakes again and again and again. We are now towards the end of this webinar. Okay, and essentially, so the key thing over here is that if you want to get to that 90th percentile, you need to be able to apply this method consistently. And for those of you who are concerned that, hey, this is going to take a lot of time, it's not. Once it becomes second nature, it's not. Think of it this way. We won't have 5x as many success stories or about 8x as many reviews as most other test prep companies on GMAT Club if this method did not work. Okay. One of the most important things that you have to realize is that if you want to master this method, you need detailed solutions. Okay. How many of you, when you solve a question, get this level of feedback on in general, whether you solve it correctly or incorrectly? How many of you get this level of detail and solutions? How many of you do that? Yay, nay? Never. Yes. Why? Because most people don't build this. Most people won't really tell you this is what the original sentence intended to communicate. Here are the three things. Here's the sentence structure. Here is how you figure out the subject verb error. But to effectively learn from every question, you need such detailed solutions. Why? Because as you learn from these solutions, you don't repeat those mistakes. As you don't repeat those mistakes, or as you avoid those mistakes, you get to that 90th percentile a lot more quickly. Which is why you need to answer the questions, which is why did you make a mistake, so that you learn from the question and apply the learning, which is where what we call as the concept of strategic review comes in. And this is something which, if you're an e-GMAT student, you do badly, we send you strategic reviews. You do badly on our concept files and on application files, you do strategic review. What is strategic review? Let's kind of look at it at a very high level. It asks you these questions. Did you understand all aspects of meaning presented in the original choice? Did you reject the answer choice? Okay. Or rather, why did you reject the answer choice? Was it grammar or was it meaning? When it's grammar, you can narrow it down to grammar. When it's meaning, you can narrow it down to which aspect of the meaning did you not choose. And then you also made a mistake to select an incorrect choice. And again, you figure out, hey, was it because you couldn't spot what the original choice intended to say? As you guys chose choice C, you did that. Was it because of a certain belief? Okay, passive voice, active voice, the fact that that should be there as a must. Those are beliefs that you have it that get corrected. Or was it because there was a grammatical rule that you had to apply in modifiers, more in verb ing modifiers or noun plus noun modifiers, that you didn't apply correctly? More often than not, what we see is most people make errors over here. The reason why people don't reach 90th percentile is I mean, it's I'd say about 30% of the cases is where we see number 3, 1 and 2 is 70%. Okay. So with that, I'm not going to do strategic review over here. I'm going to share this over here, but essentially at a very high level, if you look at this is the correct answer, and there are 3 reasons why people reject this, and you guys probably rejected this answer choice because of 1 or 3 reasons. One is the sentence structure that's unfamiliar to you, where you have that in the subject verb. The second is the misconception that always has to be used even when it's used as a connector. and the third is the passive voice. One of these three is the reasons why you actually rejected this. Yes, some of you are saying it's two, some of you are saying so, but you've stated each one of these, and I see the question in the Q&A pod, and each one of these is a misconception. And some of you are saying 3, 2, and when you get this feedback, that's when you continue to improve. Okay. Now, the other piece is, why did you select the correct answer? Let's kind of look at this part over here. Okay. And if you chose, and this is a really important part of analysis. Why? Because that's when you continue to improve. If you chose choice A, you failed to observe the sentence structure. You failed to really see the subject verb, that the subject was missing from verbs. If you chose choice B, grammatically correct, meaning distortion is a problem. Choice C, meaning distortion is a problem. Choice D, also the meaning distortion, but as claimed as a modifier error that is also there in choice D. And again, when you get this feedback, you can use it to make sure that you don't make you don't make the same mistake in subsequent questions. But you can only do this analysis if you get that level of detail in solutions. And this is something that we do in every scholarly name solution, in every solution which is there. Again, these are the questions for strategic review. With that, let's kind of look at how should you react to this feedback, and how should you get this feedback. And I'm going to do a case study over here in this. But how many of you, while learning the concepts, learned the meaning-based approach? For those of you who studied from a book, how many of you learned how to solve questions when you studied from a book? Okay. Some of you are saying yes, some of you are saying no. Let's get a few more responses. All right, I guess you guys are very tired. So when is it that you should learn these methods? You learn these methods when you are learning the concepts. Otherwise, there's no point learning. I mean, most books will just teach you the concepts, will not tell you, hey, what is it that you need to do in step 1? What is it that you need to do in step 2? What is it that you need to do in step 3? And so on and so forth. So a lot of people spend that first 30% of the time learning all of the concepts. And it's very nice when you learn these concepts. Why? Because you suddenly figure out, hey, I didn't know that verb ing form could be applied in these 3 ways. I didn't know that verb ed modifiers had to be this. I didn't know that lists could need to be logically parallel along with being grammatically parallel. And it feels very nice because it seems that you're absorbing new information. And you really don't focus on learning the methods. But if you don't learn the methods, you have a problem. Why? Because you can learn all of these concepts. The moment you get a question, your brain will not know what to do. Your brain will not know how to approach this. Okay. And that's why in the e-GMAT course structure, we actually give you application along with concepts. So we have modules which teach you concepts, but we have about 20 plus application files that teach you applications while you're doing this. The longer the module, the more application, the more focused practice you get over here. And the beauty of this is you get feedback on your ability to apply, not just your knowledge of the concept. That's one separate feedback point. Another feedback point is your ability to apply that concept right then and there. And which is why if you do well in the learning part of the course, you graduate with 60 to 70th percentile level. Okay, you already are at this point when you graduate the learning part of the course. It takes longer, but you start at a much higher standpoint, and there you only need to do master application, and you need to do refine to perfection. So again, how many times do we give this feedback while learning while just learning part, or just the application feedback? It's 23 times. In critical reasoning, that's about 39 times. You still haven't started your practice, by the way. And let's take an example of how this looks like. This is a guy who scored 730. This is just the subject verb module in the paid part of the course. Okay, what you see over here is a Sahil's dashboard, and what you see is how he's performed in each of these concepts. Now, this time that you see over here is the time that he took on this. Now, he didn't do as well on subject verb application file, yet he was able to get 100% on the practice file. So the question is, how did he achieve that? Let's kind of look at this over there, and we're going to do that again in verbs as well. But one thing you can really see is he spent a ton of time over here reviewing his mistakes, and which is what caused this. The same story in some ways repeated in verbs. This is the verbs module in the paid part. You can say this is the third module. It's I would say a medium sized module overall that we have. Again, what you see over here is that everything's tracked. Verb sequencing, he spent a ton of time. It's a big concept over here. Verbs application, he did really well. He spent a ton of time over here. But he still got 64% in the final practice course. So there's evaluation right then and there. And you can see the reason why he got that is because of most likely because of his lack of score in conditional verbs. Now, when he got that, he actually bookmarked his incorrect questions, and he was able to really see why he made a mistake, where he made a mistake. Now, for those of you who were there in the early part of the session, remember I told you how many points does an easy question have versus a medium versus hard. You see this all throughout the e-GMAT course. Here's an easy question, 4 out of 4. Here's a medium question, 8 points. And a hard question, 12 points. You can really see that, and you can see how much more valuable a hard question is compared to an easy and a medium question. He bookmarked those questions, he revised them, and he was able to consistently improve. And according to him, he said the biggest thing regarding SC was the application. He says, my concepts were pretty okay in his first 2 attempts, but he lacked the knowledge to really go from 2 to 1 options. After he learned how to apply this, that wasn't the case. So how do you go from that 70th to that 90th percentile? That's where you go to another platform that we offer, which is Scholaranium. And Scholaranium allows you to focus on your weakness. It is the world's most popular analytics platform in the GMAT space. It's actually the world's highest rated analytics platform. It's rated higher than GMAT Prep mocks. Okay, Rohit, who scored 760 on the GMAT, who's going to start at Kellogg, let's see how he improved in 90th percentile in SC. Again, he went through this. He actually did really well. In only 1 out of the 23 application files that he scored below 70%. And then after that, because he already started at that 70th percentile ability, he only needed to practice 64 questions to achieve that 90th percentile ability. This is the Scholaranium screenshot. You can see the stats over there. In fact, there's detailed stats and modifiers, subject verbs, parallelism, verbs, pronouns, and so on. So the accuracy is over there. You can see he pretty much got most questions correctly, all 100% accuracy, but 80% accuracy over here, and about 60-70% accuracy over here. Okay, so with that, if you start with the right method, if you get consistent feedback, you get to that 90th percentile ability overall, and such is the power of data. So with that, I'd like to end this session. I want to thank you guys for being with me. But again, acing the GMAT is about building ability. And to build ability, start with that personalized study plan. Make sure you understand which stage of learning you want to get to. And then from there on, make sure as you're learning, you get that feedback to get to that 90th percentile ability. If you have questions, you can write to me at rajat@e-gmat.com. Thank you. And again, as I mentioned earlier, For those of you who wanted to really know more about the meaning-based approach in SC, we have the meaning-based approach over here. You can register for the SC webinar, which is next Saturday, by clicking on register now. And let me give you the session PDF as well. Here is a session PDF that you guys can download. Okay. Also, this Monday, we have a webinar on how do you build a compelling application for Columbia as well as London Business School by Katie, who's going to really talk about how she approached this. Katie is someone who has a very unusual background, and she's a wonderful speaker. And she's going to talk about how she positioned her candidacy given her unusual background. She's going to talk about how she prepared for the interview, and why did she choose Columbia over London Business School. So again, you can click on register now. You'll go to our YouTube channel to get there. And here is the link to register for this. You can get this PPT by clicking on this over here. And again, to register for, and again, remember we have the quant workshop tomorrow. So if you need help in quant, you guys can really also go there and register for it over here. Okay, guys, with that, I want to thank everyone for joining me today. If there are no other questions, I wish you happy learning, and hopefully this webinar gave you a bit more clarity about how you should approach the test. Okay, how do you improve your profile? Let's just do that. Here is an article on how to improve your profile. Yeah, we will share the recording of this webinar with you guys fairly soon. So it should be there at 6 a.m. your time in IST. If you are in the Pacific time zone, like I am, you should be able to get it at 5:30 p.m. Pacific or 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also, if you want to stay updated with all things e-GMAT, you're welcome to connect with me on my LinkedIn. So I have upwards of 15,000 students connected with me on LinkedIn. So let me get you a link for that. Here's a link where you can connect with me on my LinkedIn over here. And on my LinkedIn, we post about 4 to 5 articles every week. We have a fairly active content team that talks about MBA admissions, that talks about success stories. You get interviews from our current students, interviews of students who've aced the GMAT, interviews of students who are currently studying at top business schools. For that, thank you very much, and I will see you in our next web.